So they continued on the little parade. They left the flags up and, continued, even though they began to run into some cars. They had to cross another bigger road. Again, there wasn't that much traffic, but they stopped at the stop sign and then went on. They're going down Watercress Creek Road, and but as they and now and then they see, well, they stopped seeing these really big farms with the wide fields and everything, but they still would now and then see a farmhouse or a barn with a barn even, but you could see that there were newer houses now built as they were approaching Earth's Drink. Well, at one point, Peter leaned forward and said to Mervin, he said, "Mervin, I got a question for you. It's kind of personal, I guess, but your language, your English, is so good, and you gave a lecture up there about the local economy I'd just like to know how it is that you sounded like a professor, and how did you get like that?" And Mervin smiled and he said, he's driving the horses the whole time, so he's watching what he's doing. But he said, "We Mennonites are not educated people. We, when I speak, most of us, when we speak English, we sound like I know we have a little accent, people tell us that, but we don't know big words in English. We can use normal, simple words fine. But when it comes to the big words, we just don't know. We've only gone to school, almost all of us, for 8 years, 8th grade, some to 9th grade. Even our school teachers have maybe only gone a couple years beyond 8th grade. Uh, so I'm not answering your question, I guess, but I just want to say that normally, it's true you would not expect a Mennonite. I might have been saying Amish, a Mennonite to know all this stuff as if I studied it and read books and stuff. No, why I know that is the wizard. The wizard. You're going to hear about him some. 5 years ago, the wizard stopped my carriage, my buggy, and on the road he stopped me and asked if he knew anybody, if I knew anybody that spoke both English and Dutch, Pennsylvania Dutch. And I told him, well, yes, my wife and I both do that. Of course, all the Mennonites speak both those languages. And the wizard wanted somebody to teach him Pennsylvania Dutch, and I took him on as a student, although it was weird because I'm not a teacher, but the wizard guided me. Now that was 5 years ago, and he speaks Dutch now, but he still stops by about once a week. Once a week, he predictably stops by to say hi, and we have conversations now, and he's told me this stuff. And so, in a way, I'm just passing on to you, or I just passed on to you about the farms and the diesel fuel, and I'm just passing on to you what I have learned from the wizard. So, there you go. And on they went now. And now, eventually, they began to see a little bit of a creek appearing in a field. Marshy ground at first, and then it was a little bit of a stream. And sure enough, that was Watercress Creek. And they were going into Roaring Spring. Now there weren't any more hills. They were just gradually going down this slow-moving creek. And before long, they came into Earth's Drink, where the houses were all very close together, and they didn't look anything like farmhouses now. And later on, I'll tell you more about those houses. But let me just go on now. Mervin could have taken a left when he got into, he passed a sign that said, "Welcome to Earth's Drink." Underneath it, welcome, WELKUM, welcome to TW, and Earth's Drink. Looks exactly the same, except there's no A in it. below, up at the top, it said "Welcome to Earth's Drink," and so that he could have taken a left and gone straight to the hotels because they were going to two of the three hotels, but he didn't. He drove into Earth's Drink a little ways. The whole town is very small, and he took a right and onto Spangler Street, and there he's. I mean, already the passengers in all three buggies were being wowed by what they saw, because on their left was a building that looked almost like a castle, stone, solid stone, with turrets, not real big, and that was the well, it said at the top. Well, it was a sort of a humble thing, but it said Leather Works, and there was a date, 1900, I think, but it looked like a castle. Well, they knew because of their education that was an example of Gothic revival, but in a town, and a little town like this, but on the right, there was Earth's Drink itself. There was a little pond there, and well, not too little, and they could see coming out of the hillside a powerful spring of water pouring out there. And Mervin actually stopped his buggy for a minute right there by the outlet, because that water, after it went through that pond, it came out of that pond roaring. You could hear it. It was a spillway maybe about that wide, with water about that high, and it just was roaring out of that pond, and that's what was coming out of that hillside. That's Earth's Drink. And he didn't say much more because he had a plan. He went on, and before long he came to a church that looked just like that Leatherworks. And it was also Gothic revival. Same kind of stone, beautiful solid limestone. There was another big church on the right, beautifully built, and he had thought about taking a left right there. To see, there's a little triangle in the middle of the town. They even call it the triangle, and he was going to just go around the triangle back to where they'd started and then go to the hotels. But instead, he kept going a little further on Spangler Street, past a municipal building, a little building, police station. That's where the borough council met, and about the next block, he took a left. Now there was a little store on that corner, tiny, really a tiny store right on the corner that had been abandoned for a while before the Great Change, but it was now back and just looking so cute because it had the big glass windows, just like as if it were 100 years ago. Really, a little store like that, and then he went. I can't remember the name of the street, but he kept going, and eventually, before long, actually, there was a cemetery up on the right. There was also another real big church on the left, but they were behind it now, a brick church, and he went out and down, climbing, because the cemetery is up on a hill, but then as he got past the cemetery, the street suddenly went down, and there, well, they saw a view. At first, I mean, it was breathtaking, really. But right there was room enough that the three buggies could pull over. Now, people watched this parade. There were lots of people, and they waved. They didn't know what was going on. They were used to horse and buggies going through town all the time now, after the Great Change, but they couldn't remember ever seeing three with white flags up there, and so they thought it must be something special. Well, the three buggies stopped, and what Mervin had done is he had brought them to the place where the old Mennonite church had been for maybe 100 years. Not too much bigger than a house, a white building. But they had moved and they'd sold the building. But that building was right at the edge of a park now. that was mowed. They got out of the buggies, and there in front of them was such a view. Mervin said, "There are your hotels." I'll tell you about the view next video.